In this video, I will provide you with a couple of different ways to calculate the wall framing stud measurements for a chimney. And for the most part, this information should apply to both new construction and remodeling or adding a chimney to your house. So the first thing I kind of want to point out is that the wall framing studs are usually going to sit on top of a wall framing plate, and the thickness of that wall framing plate will need to be calculated into your measurements, along with the wall's top framing plates and anything else you're going to be adding to the wall framing. So with that said, let's just go ahead and take a look at a measurement you could take here from either the top of the building foundation or the top of the wall framing plate to the bottom of the sheathing, and then add for the thickness of the sheathing as one way to get a starter measurement. However, I don't think that's going to be necessary because you're going to be able to measure it from the top of the bottom framing plate to here, and then do some simple math to calculate the rest of the wall framing chimney stud. So here you can see where we've just placed a stud here. You can use your measuring tape. You don't need to put the stud here, and then you're going to mark the top point where the wall framing stud meets the roof sheathing. So not too difficult there. The next step will be to either use a simple math formula to figure this height, or grab a 10-foot 2x4 and then place this end on top of the roof sheathing. And then once it is level, you can go ahead and mark the bottom. Remember, you don't want to be marking the top, you want to mark the bottom. Next up, let's take a look at another problem you might have. In our example for our framing, we are going to be building a wall on top of the roof. So the 10-foot measurement is going to need to come from this point here and not this point here. So keep this in mind. It's not just this point here. It's going to be the measurement off of the top of the roof sheathing, where the farthest point of the chimney on this side is going to intersect with the roof sheathing. Not always going to be this point right here. So let's go ahead and put our mark in there. And this will make a little more sense when I provide you with a final example of what the chimney is going to look like. In our next example, we will put the chimney on the other side of the house and go ahead and break out our long stud and our level with our straight edge. And you can always use this method here to calculate the height over here, especially on an existing house. So we're going to need to plumb this board in both directions so that it is vertical. We're going to be using that for our measurement. Or you could always measure from here to the fascia board on the top and transfer that measurement to the bottom. And you don't need to be right on the money here. I think as long as you're within an inch, you're going to be okay. I'm also nailing two 2x4s together here to provide those of you with another option if you can't find lumber long enough to calculate the chimney stud height. And again, we are going to make a mark on the wall framing stud even with the top of the sheathing. And I guess now would be a good time to point out that if you are going to get this as close as you possibly need to the minimum chimney height, then make sure that you take into calculation your roofing materials and anything else that is going to be on top of the roof that could create a problem for this measurement. Now in this example here, we do not need to go back 10 feet. We are at the top of the ridge. However, if you are going to move the chimney over, keep in mind that you need a 3-foot minimum height for your chimney. And the 10-foot by 2-foot measurement that we're used to isn't going to do you any good here. 3 foot is the minimum height for a chimney. And I do have another video on that. I will put a link to that in the video comment area. And again, we are marking the bottom and not the top. Why am I saying this? Because while I was making this video, I marked the top of it. And you could end up making the same mistake. Try not to do that. Make sure that you're measuring off of the correct spot. And of course, the minimum measurement we're going to need to add will be 2 foot. And the same measurement will apply to the other chimney we were building. Now, just to be on the safe side, keep in mind these are minimum measurements. You might want to make it a little larger. And that's what I did when building the 2 chimneys. Instead of going with 24 inches, I made this measurement 30 inches. So 30 inches from this point here to the top of the chimney wall framing studs. And this measurement will work for all of the framing studs as long as you're dealing with a level concrete pad or a level foundation. And let's go ahead and wrap this video up by taking a look at the completed wall framing for our chimneys. And as you notice, this one here is a little taller than this one here. The farther you go up the roof, the taller the chimney is going to be. So keep this in mind if you're not interested in building a huge chimney when designing your project. Try to put them at the bottom of the roof. And this is probably the most common location you're going to find for a chimney, especially for home builders who know what they're doing. Now here's the example of what I was talking about. We're not going to be coming off of this mark here. We're going to need to add 3.5 inches to it. This will be the point we're going to be coming off of. The farthest point of the chimney facing the slope of the roof, or the slope of the roof that we're going to be getting our measurements from. And try to keep in mind this video is just on calculating the wall framing stud heights. And there's usually a little more work that will need to be done to these fireplace chimneys. And I think I'm going to create a follow-up video. However, I don't know when I'm going to do it. But try to create a follow-up video on how you can calculate the height of the chimney wall framing by the components you're going to use to assemble a prefabricated metal fireplace.